Okay, hey everyone. Um, Now we're at chapter three, and chapter three, which to me is probably, I would say, the most important chapter in the book, in my eyes. And you may find that to be different, but chapter three deals with civil liberties and civil rights. And this is one of those chapters where I hope that well, I'm going to ask you to spend a significant amount of time in this particular week because one is because the fact that understanding your rights is the very basis of power and understanding that the rights of the people is essential to democracy and recognizing that that's where the power of the people comes from. But first you have to understand what they are and what equal rights means, what the context of, when we look at, the relationship between civil liberties and civil rights, um, because your rights do equal power. And when you don't take advantage of it by virtue of by performing your civic duty, by voting, then you disempower yourself. And that's one of the things that's most mind numbing to me is how we as a collective people don't show up to vote, particularly people of color, don't show up to vote, and particularly young people. You look at like blacks and Hispanics, for example, and even Asians, and the particular age group of, let's say, 18 to 24, 25, vote at a historically low percentages. We also do find that the times when they step up and vote, that change actually happens. But you have to be cognizant of the changes, cognizant of the issues that you're confronting in order to recognize that change needs to happen. So that's the first important aspect of recognizing what your civil liberties and civil rights are. And they're based on the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, which we call the Bill of Rights. And those are your rights that are guaranteed to you as a citizen. But there's also some problem about that because it's also a matter of perception, right? Because if you say, when you talk about the right to bear arms, well, does it really apply in the literal sense? Or when we talk about freedom of speech, well, can you say anything you want wherever you want? Not always. And you'll see in one of the videos that have put into this chapter where that's been contested and challenged. And I think you'll find it very enlightening regarding this particular issue when it comes to the issue of civil liberties and civil rights. Um, Mostly in this chapter, what I do is I try to eradicate some of the ignorance of racism. Um, it's amazing how when I was growing up, people of color coalesced together along with progressive people, say whites, for example, to try and push forward the agenda of equality for all people and for all genders and even sexual orientation, which also is certainly much more prevalent today than in my time. Uh, but certainly the reality of that is being able to respect the rights of individuals who don't look like you. Uh, and what I do in this chapter, and that's why I require all the videos in this chapter for you to watch, particularly because there's some that really will challenge some of the way you think about other groups of people. Particularly when people of other groups that are in struggle, like blacks and Hispanics and Asians, can discriminate against one another, which to me is always mind-boggling. How do we learn to dislike each other when we're all in the same struggle together? Uh, but the particular video that looks at by Dr. Henry Louis Gates, which looks at blacks in Mexico, I think you'll find it to be particularly enlightening. I think in my classes, I've shocked a few people with that video. So I definitely want you to watch that to sort of think about your context of how you see yourself and how you see people around you. Because one person you're going to learn about, for example, is a gentleman named Vicente Guerrero. And when I asked this question in my class, how many students know him? And of course, as you know, IBC is 90+% Hispanic. Well, 99% of them don't know who Vicente Guerrero is. And yet he was the second president of Mexico, but he was also the person responsible for kicking the Spanish out of Mexico so Mexico could be Mexico for the Mexican people. What people don't know about him is that he was African and that he was not Hispanic in the sense that we people look at today. And there's also another gentleman named Morales who's on the peso, the I think it's 50 peso, I believe. He is also African. So the person responsible for Mexico's independence was actually an African, and people don't know that. And I think that's very interesting and also enlightening because there's lots of reasons why people don't know that. But it's our ignorance that undoes us. So this chapter to me is about focusing on that issue. We also look at women's rights. There's a really great video called Iron Jawed Women. It looks at some of the historical reality of women's rights and women's movements. So I encourage you, if some of you are interested in those areas, please take a look in those issues. But it's one of the most important chapters as far as I'm concerned in the entire book. But this is how we move the bar forward as a collective group of people. Okay, next on to chapter 4.